Hey, so today we are gridding out our picture, our photo of ourselves for our silly selfie project. This is our large finished project. It is 12 by 18 and is therefore a 2/3 ratio. So we are going to do a 2-inch 6 by 9 grid on this paper. So because that is a 2/3 ratio on my large paper, this also needs to be a 6 by 9 2/3 ratio. We're going to go for a 1-inch grid. And I somehow managed to make this just perfect where this is 6 inches wide. If it was a little bit narrower, then I might need to do a smaller grid, like a 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch. So a lot of the Snapchat filters, when you go to print these out, it's a tall, skinny photo, and you might need to make your grid smaller. You just want to remember that they need to be square grids. So I'm actually just going to do a 1-inch grid on mine because I'm able to do that. So at the top of my picture and starting from the edge of my picture, I'm going to make a mark every inch. I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom of my picture so that my lines are not at some weird, crazy angle. Okay, and I don't need to draw those lines on the side because the edge of my picture is that line. Oops. Okay, now I need my 9 because I've got my 6. So most of my image is towards the bottom of this, so I actually am going to start at the bottom. It's not quite 9 inches, so I'm going to crop that little bitty bit off the top there. And that shouldn't be any big deal. Let me zoom back out just a little bit. There we go. So starting with my 9 at the bottom, I'm still going on a 1-inch grid. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm using red ink on this. You can use pencil, but I prefer ink. It's just easier to see my grid lines over top of that black and white printout. If you use pencil, a lot of times it's the exact same value as what you're drawing over top of, and it's just really hard to see those lines. So I do always recommend using, I recommend red, but anything other than black shows up really well over top of those lines. So I've got this all gridded out. I'm going to come in later and cut off all of my edges that I don't need. Just makes my life a little bit easier. And then I'm ready to draw my grid on my large 12 by 18 paper. Now, if all you have is this ruler, that's fine. Just remember, we're going to be using pencil and we're going to be drawing really, really light. We need this just dark enough to see your lines because we're going to be erasing this grid when we're finished. So I'm going to try to keep this parallel to the edge of my paper. And every 2 inches, I'm going to make a mark. And you can see my paper is actually almost 1/4 of an inch long on one end. Oops, tried to make a 1 inch mark there. So I'm gonna go ahead and make that mark and draw that line. We're gonna trim that off later. And since this is long on this end, I'm gonna make sure that I start my measurements from this end as well. And that way when it's long on the same end, because otherwise it will give your drawing a bit of a slant. I'm off somewhere. 8, there we go. 10, 12. I don't know how well that's showing up on there, but I'm drawing darker than I normally would just so that it shows up on the video. But normally I would draw these lines like just dark enough to be seen so that they're easier to erase later. Okay, now because I'm using a 12-inch ruler, I have these in the classroom, but most of you at home are probably using these, so I'm going to show you how to do it with this. When you make your marks, oh, thankfully it is actually just, I forgot one, sorry. Forgot that little weird end bit that they're gonna trim off. Okay, so I'm gonna make my 2-inch marks here. Okay, and then we're gonna bring this on down this way, and I wanna make sure that I'm lining this up right here. Because I only have a 12-inch ruler, I want it to be able to line up from both ends and keep my lines straight. So if you're only using a 12-inch ruler, make sure that you are making a set of marks in the middle as well as the ends of your paper, or you're gonna end up with some really slanted lines. So even though this is an 18-inch paper, if all you have is a 12-inch ruler, you can make this work. You just got to be really careful to line up your marks extra well and give yourself those additional marks in the middle. And then when you're clear finished with the gridding part, you're ready to start transferring your picture one box at a time, but we'll get there in just a minute. So I wasn't quite lined up right there. It shouldn't mess anything up too bad though. It's pretty close. Okay, so I've got my 2-inch grid on my large paper, and I've got my 1-inch grid on this paper. I'm gonna do myself a favor and cut all of these edges that I don't need off. Especially if I was cropping a lot off. If I had done a smaller grid, I could have done a 1/2-inch grid on this and really zoomed in on my face. You can absolutely do that as long as it's still a 6x9 grid and it's square. It will still translate over onto this larger paper. So I did that. Well, I didn't do that. A couple of students have done it that way. And if you do that and you have a lot of excess picture there, I really do recommend cutting off these edges just to get rid of distractions. So now I know this is all I'm using. And I can take one of these papers that I just cut off and fold this into a nice 90-degree angle. And use my squares to help me line it up. And then I'm ready to use this to block off to where I'm just showing what square I want to work on. And I can show you how that works on one that I've been working on. Someone stole my black piece of paper. Oh well. Okay, so I fold mine over as I work so that I don't accidentally draw the same line over and over again. But I definitely have to use one of these sometimes when I'm doing this. So you can tell I've got a lot going on in some of these boxes, and how I deal with that is I create an additional grid in those boxes. So this box has an additional grid. I actually drew an additional grid inside of those smaller bits so that I could really focus in on those angles and where my eyes are, because they're a little bit of an angle. And I've got shadows, I've got reflections, I've got glasses, and I've just got a ton of stuff going on in these couple of boxes. And I needed additional grids, and you can see where they're really, really lightly drawn in here to help me get all of that stuff straight. Okay, so I just started at the top and worked my way down. I've got some nice coffee stain going on right there. But I'm just using lines. Now, I'm doing this a little bit differently than a lot of people because I'm going to do mine in pen and ink. So I'm just lightly sketching mine out. I'm not shading out all of my values like you would be if you're doing pencil. I've just got some rough lines here to indicate, you know, the directional lines for hair, maybe some places where I want to make sure I've got good shadows. And when I get done drawing a good chunk of this, I go back through and I erase my grid lines really, really well so that my pencil doesn't show through my pen and ink. And I haven't really decided what color I'm going to use for this. I'm thinking, I don't know. I'll have to look and see what colors I've got. I like purple. Might do that. But anyway, so once you get your paper gridded out, you're going to start transferring this image one box at a time. And if you need to, make a mark in that box as you get them drawn so you don't accidentally draw the same one over and over. Don't try to draw the whole picture all at once, just like the worksheets, okay? So just one box at a time. Get that box drawn, scoot this over, draw the next box, get that drawn, scoot it over, draw this next little bit in the box. There isn't anything in these other boxes, so then I'm ready to go down to the next row. And that way you don't accidentally end up with an extra row distorting your face or making it really, really long or accidentally getting the wrong things in the wrong boxes. Alrighty, well, that's all I have for you. So I guess if you have any questions, let me know. And I can try to video conference with you. All right. See you tomorrow, guys.